And today we are going to be talking about the Indian Residential School in Kamloops in Canada. I don't know if you guys heard of this, but I wanted to cover this. Actually want to go into some of the history of this school, which I was reading earlier. So again, this is Kamloops Indian Residential School. If you haven't seen what's been going on in the news recently, we can just go over this because I think this is relevant to a lot of the topics that I cover, some of my lives and some of my past videos. It's very, very relative because it deals with, religious power and religious corruption. So if you, we read here the history, this history section is what I wanted to go over. Zoom in a little bit here. What would become the Kamloops Indian Residential School was established in 1893 after initially opening on May 19, 1890 as the Kamloops Industrial School. The stated aim of the school was the acculturation of indigenous children, right? Let's go into the meaning of that. It's a process of social, psychological, and cultural change, acculturation, that stems from the balancing of two cultures while adapting to the prevailing culture of the society. So, just to explain it, Native Americans from British Columbia here in Kamloops, British Columbia, the most western part of Canada, is full with Native Americans. I believe Native Americans are called the Secwepemc. Interior of the Canadian province. Yeah, so they're the First Nations of people residing in the interior of the Canadian province of British Columbia, the most western part of Canada, pretty much on the Pacific, side of things here. So let's just go into the controversy though, because this is what's going on in 2021. Now this is history and pretty much secrets being unearthed, literally. Because graves of children was found right behind this school, and this was never accounted for until now. We're recently digging this up. People have been finding this all around this campgrounds where there used to be a school. The school's no longer there. So in 2021, here, let's actually zoom in on this. In 2021, evidence of approximately 200 probable unmarked burials was found near the school in an investigation by Sarah Bailu, a ground-penetrating radar specialist. There had long been accounts of unmarked graves at residential schools, but none had previously been uncovered. Chief Roseanne Casimir of let's call it the TTES, because that's the Native American name for the tribe. It says TTES is previously known as the Kamloops Indian Band, so it's the tribe pretty much. It's a First Nations government within the Shuswap Nation Tribal Council, which represents 10 of the 17 Secwepemc band governments. All right, so just so you know what that is, I'm going to just say TTES. They said that the finding represented an unthinkable loss, never documented by the school's administrators, never documented. So that's what makes it even fishier, like what was going on that it wasn't documented. Why is this dug up, being dug up now as if somebody didn't want to find this out? Obviously, you can't hide your secrets forever. Some people do get away. And we still don't know what happened here, and if there's more children that are missing or that have been found, more graves. So let's keep reading here. It said never documented by the school's administrators, right? And if you want to go into this, here are the links for that down at the reference. And that work was underway to determine whether the Royal British Columbia Museum holds relevant records. Yeah, you can see the Globe covered this, the New York Times covered this, Al Jazeera covered this. So this made international news, because it's dealing with the Catholic Church, which has had um, great influence for the last, what, 7 centuries or more. Well, actually, let's say it's 5 or 6, but I mean, maybe even longer. Worldwide recognition. I mean, a worldwide presence. People visit the Pope, and this is a big deal. Everybody wants to know what's the Pope got to say, right? And he did address this recently. I mean, they never say much. They say they're religious, mumbo jumbo, and act like they're empathetic. I mean, yeah, you might be empathetic now, but what can you do about this? This has been now 50 years have gone by, or over 50 years, where these graves have been buried, I believe. I mean, who knows? I mean, they could have started burying children, and what do they do to those children? There needs to be more, evidence that comes out and more reports. They're still doing their investigations, right? And they're dealing with the Catholic Church now. Now, because the Catholic Church has so much power, they can make this investigation stay hush and deal with certain people, and not like, how not everybody has the opportunity and the benefit and the privilege of having that type of power and pull where you can halt investigations, and you don't want this coming out. You can uncover only certain things that come up, right? You wouldn't even know a lot of the secrets. Like this would have been unknown unless this lady here, Sarah Bailou, who had that what is it, a ground penetrating radar machine. If it wasn't for that, right now, this is science coming in, destroying religion, right? Some scientific digging here, and I mean, before digging, you can penetrate the ground to see, what you can expect in this area, see how far you can dig, what kind of tools and machines you need to use, especially if there's a burial. Now you want to be careful around that area. So the fact that they're able to do this now is a testament to how how science has progressed and can help us discover things like this. That this is a problem. Who knows how many other graves were found, and what happened to these children? There's so many stories. We're gonna get into this because the Catholic Church. I mean, I was born and raised a Catholic, so this has been an impact in my life since I was born. Before I could even think for myself, this whole religion that my family's still heavily involved in, even after all the craziness that has come up. This is just one of the things here. So let's finish reading this though. So it was never documented by the administrators, right? By the school administrators. And that work was underway to determine whether the Royal British Columbia Museum holds relevant records, right? So this museum here, I was actually looking into this not too long ago because they have a lot of information on the Native Americans from Canada that migrated up from Alaska, or that area which is called Beringia, and got to the Americas. And these are, Native Americans that populated this whole country. They're all related. So I was looking into this, and this they have a lot of power here. But Royal British Columbia, why? Because this is connected to England, right? The royals of England, Queen Elizabeth, and all of that. And the Catholic Church is very much tied into that, the Church of England and all of that. They've been in cahoots for how many years now? How many centuries? Let's see here. It says preliminary findings announced in May 2021 by Kamloops Catholic had referred to an estimate of 215 graves found at the site. But in July 2021, Bailou revised her estimate to 200 and noted that they should be considered probable burials or targets of interest. because only with an excavation could they be confirmed as burials of human remains. Bailu also noted that the apple orchard she surveyed constituted only 2 acres of the 160-acre residential school. So they only were able to, survey a few acres of this entire school site. It says, and more burials might be found in other areas of the property. This is crazy here. How this has gone so long here, without people finding out. The work underlying the initial discovery was funded by a provincial Pathway to Healing grant and carried out by the nation's Language and Culture Department, with advice from ceremonial knowledge keepers to ensure the work was done respectfully. In the press release issued by TTES announcing the discovery, Cook P7 Kashmir thanked, which is Chief Kashmir, thanked preliminary work done in the early 2000s that led to the discovery. The National Center for Truth and Reconciliation has so far released official recognition of some 51 students who died at the school. Their dates of death range from 1919 until 1971. The regional chief of the British Columbia Assembly of First Nations, Terry Teague, said in May 2020 there were plans being made for forensic experts to exhume, identify, and repatriate the remains of the children from the school. So this is a lot of work that needs to be done into, finding out what the hell happened here. And, so you can get a clear answer. You can give a clear answer to the victims or to the relatives of the victims if they're still alive. They probably don't know what happened to some of their family members that ended up in the school. Let's go into some more of these videos here, because this was actually a video in 1937 with no sound that I was playing in the beginning of the video there. So let's go into this one here. This is the first video I saw about this. This is a National Post. Let's see here. "215 graves found at Kamloops. Unmarked graves have been found at a former residential school in British Columbia." Okay, so we already read some of this stuff. The largest school in Canada. At its peak in the 1950s, more than 500 students were enrolled there. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission has records of 51 children dying at the school. Every Indian student smelled of hunger. The First Nation says the knowledge of more deaths was spoken about but never documented. Now that modern technology has found hundreds of graves, a forensic investigation could help reveal how these students lived. So that's what they're doing now. See, this happened June 3rd. This was posted a long time ago, but let me see if I can find some of the more recent ones. This was a month ago here. Let's see. June 6th.
That was probably the safest time in my life.
Barbara McNabb Larson still remembers the day it changed.
I remember when they came to get us from here. The first year we went in a livestock truck.
And the next year?
They came out with an army truck. And they drove us back to the school in these trucks. And they unloaded us like we were just little animals.
She is one of thousands forced through the doors for nearly 80 years of Kamloops Residential School.
The first things they did was they took us down to our cleansing room, where they cut off our hair. Then they deloused us. Then they scrubbed us down with disinfectant like we were diseased animals. Sorry.
The name of the institution is now known worldwide. Students always suspected children were buried here, and now they are reliving the horror.
For 3 days, I went into a depression so deep. And a grief that I never knew I had.
No cross or stone, and scarce information to mark who lies buried here.
It's going to be Christmas, and we want to get all ready for Christmas, don't we?
The Catholic Order Sisters of St. Anne's taught at the school.
We have knowledge of maybe about 20 children that died in the school over that 80-year period.
Sister Marie Zeroni belongs to the order.
So there is a hint in the records of another cemetery connected to the school, but we don't know where.
I actually don't know if that reference comes from that school or from another school.
At Kamloops Residential School, the threat of death hung in the air.
You better behave. Don't get out of line because there's the graveyard. And there's also the river. Those were warnings that were given to us as little tiny children.
They
5,
need
6
to look
years
at that
old.
river.
Death was real here. We do know how some of these children died. Records from the 1930s were shared with us. Leslie Lewis, 9-year-old boy, died from an epileptic seizure. The Indian agent filed a report noting the overcrowded conditions in the institution. During an epidemic, it is impossible to properly isolate the patient and contacts. The need for separate quarters to house sick children is evident.
I wanted to go home. I was weeping. I remember there's a train whistle. The trains would go by Kamloops, and I'd hear the whistle. And it became one of my triggers later on after I left a residential school. You know, I'll tell you the truth. That years of residential school was like a blur to me. Suicide, I remember this young man or young boy hung himself in the bathroom.
Wow.
Still today they remember that. They still get nightmares about it. And about the runaways and people jumping trains, getting killed jumping a train, you know, freezing outside, running away in the wintertime.
There was another girl, Florence Morgan, whose age is not noted, died from a viral infection. The Indian agent reported her body was returned home by truck.
And that's one of the things about life lessons. Say, for example, when you got distraught the first time, I sounded like a coyote, howling and crying. The second time, not much so. Then the third time, he wanted me to cry. And I said, I'm not going to cry. And I went and found a nice spot where there was nobody around, and then I had to cry.
Some never made it home. The girl's name was Mary Francois, age not noted, died in hospital from a blood clot in her brain. Her father, chief of the Adams Lake Band, who only saw her after death, wrote a letter requesting, when a child of the school is taken sick and requires hospital attention, that the parent be notified at once. The community gathered testimonials in this book.
You're growing up, you're not allowed to do something. I wasn't allowed to read this book.
Mike McKenzie reads a passage from survivor James Child.
I walked along the riverbank, and I found that student floating in the water by the shore. His body was stiff. For finding that deceased person, I was strapped 150 times on each hand. I think there was a few times that happened.
Mackenzie's father's story is also in here.
My dad, Terry Denault, went to the, we call him Shinny, and he went to the Kamloops Indian Residential School. We were so young, we didn't know where to turn for help. I was whipped so many times that eventually you get so tough that you block those things out and you can't feel things. That's how it was here.
This oral history fills a gap between the still incomplete record of the residential school era. Many records were pulped by the federal government, including from Kamloops. Funeral records destroyed, Indian agent reports destroyed, student lists destroyed.
Those records were not highly valued in terms of being preserved from the recycling process that went on.
John Malloy, an author and historian who worked for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission.
A lot of that information was simply lost.
He said Indian Affairs officials sometimes failed to record information.
We report abuse of these children to you when you don't do anything about it, and therefore we're not going to be bothered reporting to you any longer.
The same lack of care accompanied the death of children.
Children died, children were buried, parents were not necessarily told that they had died. Children were buried in unmarked graves, adjacent to the schools oftentimes.
Death a part of life in residential schools. But there's one institution with key information still in the shadows.
There were records kept by nuns and records kept by priests and sort of diaries. And the claim was made that these were personal documents, right?
Zeroni says a fire at the school destroyed the first 30 years of records. She said they have opened their archives to aid in the search. But as for letting outsiders sift through the more personal files,
I would need to know what it is they're looking for. And no, we wouldn't just turn them all over.
But the one history that can never be hidden is the one carried by those who came home.
I call upon all our people across our Turtle Island, all of our First Nations.
Turtle Island.
It doesn't matter whether you're a Mohawk or a Cree or a Dene or a Shishwak or a Kipkiskan. We're all one people. We're one nation. And it is our cultural and traditional strength, I believe, that has allowed us to carry on and to live.
Jorge, Canadian Cardinal Thomas Collins and the Prime Minister seemed
So that's CBS News, The National. Their report, that was an emotional report there. The life and times of Kamloops Residential School in British Columbia. Something that you need to be aware of, that is now in the news, even though, it's history, but we're just finding out about this now. So what can we do about this at this point? Learn from it is what I can do. I don't have the power to change what's going on in the Catholic Church. My little bit of power is right here, this channel and my voice, to reach out to others that can maybe reach out to others and spread this message, to be aware of how religion, see now, especially if, let's say you're working for this school and you want to help out, or you're working for the church and you really are a dedicated nun or a father and you want to help out, and then you hear about abuse from a fellow father, right? Somebody that works with you. You hear about this abuse that this father is doing from children. Now, the power that you have is to spread that information. What happens, though, with religion is that you have a bias, a very strong bias, that now you're going to start looking at your faith and the church and how this is going to hurt the church. And this might hurt your faith. This might, have you thinking, am I going against God? Is God going to judge me? And very easily that information could be hidden. Now, in this case, we don't know what happened. We don't even have the information like we do with other cases. There's been many Catholic priests recently that have been charged. I forget the one that I saw recently, but this is a story that I actually been watching They turned it into a Netflix special called The Keepers. If you guys want to check that out, it's like about 6 or 7 episodes, like an hour long, I believe, 45 minutes long each, maybe more. Forgot. I really got into binge watching this about the murder of Sister Kathy Sesnick, which is they use her as the main. They put her on the cover because that's the main thing that the documentary series is surrounded around, is her murder. But there's so much more that came up because of that murder. So I want to actually read about that real quick. That's the Sister Kathy. So in this case, this nun was actually trying to help the children in this case, and she ended up being murdered, and her murder was covered up. This is the power that religion can have right here. You know, because you'll see this happen in Baltimore, man. It's what's crazy, man. This was like in the 60s through the 70s. And the father never really got, I mean, he got nothing. He got a slap on the wrist. Father Maskell, Joseph Maskell is his name. But let me see if I could find a nice little, yeah, let's watch this trailer here. Real short.
Baltimore has always been a quintessentially Catholic city.
The priests were the authority. Whatever they told you to do,
Baltimore.
you did.
The city has its level of corruption. Sister Kathy exemplified this spirit of compassion and kindness.
I have never had a teacher like that before.
She was murdered our senior year, and it's always haunted many people in the community.
Our mission, we were driven to find out who hurt Sister Kathy.
People pop up from 45, 50 years ago who say, I have a story I'd like to tell you.
I believe Kathy Sesnick was killed because she was going to talk about what went on at Keo.
There's an on-the-record public story of what happened to Sister Kathy, and then there's the world beneath.
The police department and the state could provide protection for the priests.
There were other people brought in, local business owners, politicians that were part of this network.
I can testify that over 100 victims have been abused. Time is getting short for us to be able to figure out what happened to Kathy.
My father said to my mother, you want to know why I drink? Because we killed a woman and we put her behind the shop. He said, see what happens when you say bad things about people?
This goes bigger and deeper than we can imagine. The story is not the nuns killing. The story is the cover-up of the nun story.
Yep, there you go. That's what I've been watching here. That's really made me want to look into made me want to do a video about just everything here. So you got a little taste of that with the trailer. You could go ahead and watch that, but I want to read about this real quick, because you can always get more here if you read. Now these the references here come from the Huffington Post. You got the Pittsburgh Post. A lot of newspapers have covered this. A lot of news networks have talked about this. So Netflix made a series out of it, because like they said, the story is not so much the murder but the cover up. That one lady that mentioned that at the end, she was a student there, and this nun was like her favorite teacher. She, they be in these schools teaching the children, and this nun was very, she was outspoken, and she brought it up to Father Maskell, who is the main culprit in this, man, who got away This cat, damn, all they gave him, they moved him from one church to another is what they did. They don't like showing that photo so much of, let me see if I can find this cat. Joseph Masco. This is the priest right here. This guy was a damn dirty motherfucker right here, man. Damn. And then they got power with the police department now. So once the police department comes looking, you know, they're going to come to him, to this father, to the church. The church has to deal with this now. Right? Oh, you got to deal with the Archdiocese of Baltimore. Now it's going to go up to the Archdiocese of Baltimore, and they're going to meet. You're going to see they met with one of the victims who never spoke out from 1967. Let me see if I can find that actually. Joseph Masco. Oh, no, that's not what I meant. Joseph Masco. They don't want his name to come up there in the searches. You see that? Let's see, man. This cat is... This is where it began here. Because there were accusations. This is what's been denied by the Archdiocese, that they offered this one man years later, who he was abused in the 60s as a child. They offered this man money or some type of like, what do you want, a boat? They actually said this. This is the Archdiocese, supposedly or allegedly, the Archdiocese of Baltimore. I forget this guy's name. So it says, prior accusations of sexual abuse against female students at Keogh High School. Masco was first accused of forcing an altar boy at St. Clement's Church, Charles Franz, to drink wine before sexually abusing him. Right, so that's the victim, Charles Franz. Franz and his mother came forward in 1967. The next year, instead of charging or removing Masco from the ministry, the Archdiocese of Baltimore simply removed him from St. Clement and sent him to a neighboring parish, Our Lady of Victory. There, his duties included acting as the moderator of the Catholic Youth Organization. During CYO dances, Masco frequently left a BCPD auxiliary officer to act as security while he went on ride-alongs with other BCPD officers. When sent to Our Lady of Victory, he was also assigned the position of chaplain counselor at the all-girl kiosk school. While there, his abuse continued and became progressively worse. So that was where the DVD that Netflix did, the documentary that Netflix produced, this is where it pretty much most of the stories take place. And then at the end, they bring out this Charles Franz. I didn't find out about him towards the end of this. So it leads you on, and it takes you on this crazy story. It starts right here at the school with the murder of this, this nun, this sister. Now, there's always going to be people that are willing to do good. People that are willing to help out. It's always going to be those people within the organizations, religious organizations. You're going to find that, of course. But then also, you're going to find the evil people that use, their power to, do more corruption. And, that cover up their corruption and continue on being corrupt. And not only that, do what you want to your own self. You can't, you want to be an alcoholic, you want to destroy yourself, do drugs, you're doing that to yourself. Now, I don't agree that anybody does that, but, you're going to now harm other people, innocent people. Now you're doing harm to others. These are sick individuals that go from their sexual desires to murder, covering up their evil, their corruption, because the religious organization that they have some type of status. This is a cult. This is a cult. This is the biggest cult in the world right here. That's been doing so much damage over the years. And we're talking about recent history only. We're touching the tip of the iceberg with these stories at Kamloops, right here in Baltimore. You know, I was the church I grew up in, that I always went to for Easter, Christmas. There's a Catholic church called Our Lady of Sorrows in Corona, Queens. See if I could get a picture of that place. This is where I was actually baptized at. And I used to always, this is actually my first job was here too. They had a fire in 2005, 2015. Yeah, man, just want to see this real quick. This is just a little bit of my history. Right here, Our Lady of Sorrows.
Rocked into Our Lady of Sorrows Church, overjoyed to be inside for the first time in nearly 2 years. In
Los
January
Dolores.
2015, an electrical fire broke out in a choir loft, severely damaging the organ, stained glass windows, and roof.
When the fire happened, it broke my heart. It broke everybody's heart because we all love the parish. And now that we're here, everybody's so happy and excited.
On this night, incense is the only smoke bellowing through the building as Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio dedicates the church.
I remember the day of the fire was here in the morning, and it's still
Brooklyn.
burning, and thank God we saved the church. The church is the people, but we need a place to worship. The church for us is not just a meeting hall, it's a sacred place.
In this sacred place, the Bishop of Brooklyn places relics of saints inside the altar, then anoints it with chrism oil. Parishioners packed the church, outside spaces, and
Wow, look at
gymnasium,
this
where
place.
masses were celebrated during the rebuilding.
Oh, that's a little auditorium on the side there. Yeah, I used to actually work there. This is where I got my first job. In the auditorium, they used to have daycare for all the children in the area. And, you know, I got paid through the Catholic Church, my first job, pretty much. You know, that's the same place I was baptized. Haven't heard of any allegations or anything there. I think I knew a few people that were altar boys. I never wanted to do that. My family was pushing me to do that. I was like, hell no, I didn't want to do it back then. I wasn't into this stuff, man. You know, I just wanted to take a look at that church. Has a lot of history. That area, a lot of Hispanics, you know, yeah. But back to this story here about the abuse within the Catholic Church, man. Let's go into the murder here. So she was like 27, man. She disappeared on November 7th of 1969. Now, there was also a student that was being abused by this Father Masco, right? Let's go into him. My bad. This is actually what I wanted to go to just before we went to the Our Lady of Sorrows. Let's see. Yeah, 1992, the first sexual abuse allegation against Masco was made public by Weiner. Let's see. So it wasn't, man, made public till 1992. This happened in 1969. Yeah, so it was the same girl that was being abused. She actually came, like, people had to, there were multiple people that got abused. But the first one that came up with the allegation couldn't even remember because she said that she thinks the father was also hypnotizing her. Like, this Father Masco, man, he was into psychology and all of this, you know. And he used to also get them drunk, just like, you know, like the other stories they found with the boy Charles France. They were making him drink as a young boy. I forgot how old he was. You know, it's like 9 or something. Making this boy drink, and that fades your memory, and now you're easily, you know, seduced, and you're vulnerable now to these psychological tricks, man. And this father was very aware of how to hypnotize, how to use certain things. And this woman didn't remember till years later. And she started remembering all these things that she hid. Like, she psychologically said she feels like she had to hide that because, like, it was like a survival tactic that her body and her mind and she went through it. It was just like it never happened. She completely forgot about this. And as people started asking questions, some of the students wanting to know about the murder, they came upon that this nun was murdered because one of the students told the nun first about Father Masco. And the nun, Sister Kathy Sesnick, confronted Father Masco about it. And there were multiple people that were involved in the disappearance of her, and because the student now alleges that she saw the dead body of the sister and that she was brought to this damn little shrub, this little area, hidden area where the body was. And this was way later too. This was months after the sister was missing. And she disappeared. Nobody knew what the hell happened to her. And the child was even shown this. She said there were maggots. The body was already decomposing. And this is crazy how not only they were able to do this, but cover it up and get away with it and just live their life. Let's talk about this. Look at this cat's early life here. Masco, Anthony Joseph Masco, born in Baltimore, Maryland, to Joseph Francis Masco, blah, 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 blah. Masco was ordained on May 22nd, 1965. At the age of 26, his peers described him as deeply intelligent and fascinated with psychology. In 1972, Masco earned a master's degree in school psychology from Towson State University, and then a certificate of advanced study to counseling from Johns Hopkins University. So, like I said, this man knew his shit. He was a sicko who gained power, fronting like he was some holy man with their white collars, right? Fronting, hiding, like as if that matters how you dress and all this shit. They like to show like we got like the Hebrew Israelites with the fringes. Why are you not wearing fringes? What the hell does fringes? What does that have to do with anything or any apparel? It doesn't mean that you're a righteous person. So they have these white collars that's supposed to symbolize some purity. Let's read more about these allegations here. Now, we read about Charles Francis first, right? This young boy. Now, let's read about what happened to some of these girls. This cat was touching everybody. Jean Hargaden Weiner, a student at Kia, alleged she first confided in Father E. Neil Magnus in 1968 about sexual abuse she was subjected to at the hands of her uncle when she was a child, beginning at age 14 and continuing from 1968 to 1972. Magnus then sexually abused Weiner and blamed her for being promiscuous. So some of these students at these schools would confide in these different... Now this is a different father, Father Magnus. They would confide in these people. And these fathers get turned on by the confession. Now, these are children. These are young people that are opening themselves up, looking for help and guidance, thinking, these are people they look up to. It's not just somebody, close to them, because you could be close to somebody and not want to confide in certain things, not want to say certain things. But if you're actually opening up, about abuse from a family member, you think that this person's going to help you, and they take advantage of that and call you crazy, make you think that you're crazy, and not only that, they threaten, they intimidate, and that's going to do something to a person that puts fear in them, and now you're going to shut up, just like people, I dealt with this in the damn cult. People, they're scared to talk. They're scared to expose certain things, and they find out years later, or they realize years later, like, damn, I should have said something, or that ain't right, and it's like, you hide it. You feel like you're wrong. You know, they make you feel like there's something wrong with you, that maybe you deserve to get violated. You deserve to get raped. You know, just like they do in these Muslim countries, man. They be dealing with women and talking about, you know, any allegations that they bring up. You gotta have like 5 witnesses and shit for some of these allegations. Like, you know, they gotta have all this evidence, and they don't believe the allegations alone. They blame them for being evil or promiscuous. They blame the victims constantly. That constantly happens. Because you showed your chin, you showed your eyes or your eyebrows and your forehead. Like, what? They make them cover up completely. If not, they make it seem like, yo, you showing your neck, you being promiscuous, you're trying to show your collarbone or something. Like, yo, any little thing. This is crazy, some of the rules that religion imposes on men and women. With the attire, from everything, it's like sexually, and they, you know, it messes them up psychologically, sexually. You know, later on, they got all types of issues, man, and they want to hide it. They want to mask it. They want to, you know, they don't want to admit it. They don't want to go through the process of trying to fight against such a powerful church, you know, because look what could happen to some of these people. I mean, you end up dead, and then you get covered. It gets covered up. Now, let's talk about. Let's read more about this. Is some of the first allegations that started coming up in the church, and this is all connected to, you know, Father Maskell also. It says Magnus then sexually abused Weiner and blamed her for being promiscuous. Later, Maskell joined in the abuse. So this was being done by multiple people in power within the church. This is why religious organizations give people too much power. This is how too much power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. It was a quote. Is one of my favorite quotes. Because once you get to a certain point of power within an organization, almost everything that you do or miss out or don't take action on is now an abuse, because you put yourself up as a leader and you create this hierarchy, and you can't possibly be aware of everything and be there in every situation when you're the head of some organization, but you're responsible for making a wrong right, for righting a wrong. Now, so there's a lot of responsibility that comes with this high status. So, you know, there's a lot of corruption possible corruption that can take place. I mean, so much, so easily. Once that power, that head at the top is corrupt, it's going to stream down. And look at this. Now you have a connection with two people of power wielding their power within this organization full with children. This is a horrible situation right here. All because these people have a status within a church. You know, that's not good enough right here. This is I mean, moving them to a different location, this person is going to keep continuing doing. They're not getting the punishment. You're not holding them accountable for their actions. They're constantly putting it on other people. Like, maybe you did something wrong. Maybe you were being promiscuous. You wanted it. It's like mentally you wanted it. Or what do they call subconsciously you really wanted it. They'll say shit like that, make a person start thinking, then was it my fault? I deserve this? And now you have this religious power that comes with that. You try to make it seem as if God has your approval. And, you know, that's the power that happens with these. That's the issue with these organizations that wield all this power. Now they can make you think that God is speaking through them. And if this is tied in with your belief now. This organization, your whole family is a part of it. You have friends that are a part of it. So if you come out, you're going to lose all of that immediately, because you put yourself in the position and the family where this whole church is now your whole belief system is now dealing with your schooling, and this is problematic here. This is very problematic to begin with. They don't, and then the church now, because of their status, they don't want these allegations to come up. They try to keep it secret, and the victims want to make it known. Man, this is crazy. Let's just read some more here. I don't know. Reading through some of these different stories, it's like sickening, man. It says, later Maskell joined in the abuse. Weiner stated she was far more frightened of Maskell, who she found to be more intimidating and threatening. Maskell repeatedly called her a whore and forced her to blank his semen. Jesus, swallow his semen. Jesus. Claiming she was receiving the Holy Spirit. That's disgusting, man. Look at this crap. Teresa Lancaster, another alleged victim at Kiosk, stated that on Halloween of 1970, Maskell drove her to a popular location where students gathered. 2 police officers arrived and directed other students to leave, then raped Lancaster while Maskell waited outside the car. Maskell raped this other girl, had cops waiting. Cops were there. Cops were brought to clear the scene so they can rape this girl on Halloween. This was done by, let me see. Oh, the police officers raped her. Holy shit. While Maskell waited outside the car. I didn't even catch that. That's crazy. 2 police officers arrived and directed other students to leave, then raped Lancaster while Maskell waited outside the car. That's crazy. So that's one of the first things that happened in this area. Now cops are involved. Cops are another faction, police department, that have power. Now when that power becomes corrupted, that becomes a big issue too. That's why they constantly have to be vetted, checked. These stories that come up. But now when you're involved in a town, when you have a small town like this that has so much power, where you have the police department now getting involved with this powerful organization, the Catholic Church, who has these children there. Now this word is getting around. The father's telling people now all around that, there's children. I got these girls over here. We could do this and we could do that. How do you think this all went down? Maskell is acting this here. The father's acting like a pimp here in this situation. This is crazy. This is crazy. Now let's get into the murder of this nun, Sister Kathy Sesnick. In 1969, toward the end of the school year, Weiner allegedly confided about the abuse of Kathy Sesnick. Catherine Sesnick, a popular nun among the students, Sesnick promised she would help, but she was then transferred along with her friend, Sister Helen Russell Phillips, to Western High School for a public school outreach teaching program. Sesnick disappeared on November 7th, 1969, and her body was eventually discovered on January 3rd, 1970. Her body was found almost 2 months later. 2 months later, 1969, November to January. That's almost 2 months. Her body was in a wooded area here. It says 4 days after her disappearance, 20-year-old Joyce Malecki also disappeared in a nearby region. Weiner alleged that shortly after Sesnick's disappearance, Maskell took her to a wooded area to see Sesnick's decomposing body and stated, "You see what happens when you say bad things about people?" This is crazy here. This is insane. There were multiple people here involved. You have cops involved. You have, I mean, the death itself. Let's talk about this. He claimed his innocence until his death due to a stroke on May 7th, 2001. Maskel's body was exhumed on February 28th, 2017, prior to the release of the Netflix documentary series, The Keepers, for DNA testing involving the murder of Kathy Sesnick. So they, man, this is crazy. They got the DNA from his body. It was exhumed, meaning it was taken out for this reason. I mean, this is important. So shit, fuck this guy right here, man. They need to shit on his grave, on his carcass, in his skull, motherfucker. Maskel's DNA did not match the forensic profile from 1970. Although investigators noted that this did not definitely rule him out as a suspect, though never formally charged, the Archdiocese of Baltimore had settled with 16 of Maskel's possible victims for a total of $472,000. Damn, that's it? For 16 victims? You see what they get away with here? In July 2017, the health service executive in Ireland opened an investigation into the employment of Maskel. As of October of 2019, the HSE refused to offer any time frame for the investigation. Abby Shaw, a former student of Sesnick, expressed frustration that HSE refused to release youngsters for the Irish Health Board after he fled a trial for sexual abuse of minors in America. It is cause for public concern. If there were problems in the background check system, these should be discussed and corrected. Man, there were also some stories that came up from an Ireland school, from a school in Ireland for children, where there was some foul play, not dealing with this same story, but still dealing within the Catholic Church. All these stories that come out now this story here, there's a lot of things connected to this. Like, it's not just the police department, but there was political people, man, that were put in power. There were people that were put in power, and this is all connected to the Catholic Church. You can get into more of this here, because Maskel had connections to politicians, the police department, police chief, I believe. And if a police chief, the head of an organization, becomes corrupt, what's going to happen with everybody else under there? Not everybody else, but people that, get close, or somebody that might find out some dirt on the head of the department, the police chief, or a father, or an archdiocese, anybody in a position of power that has the power to make something like a story go away, because the story is going on within these doors. We don't know what goes on within all the doors. We don't know the information. The information is not as privy to the public because it's dealing with this Catholic Church, and they have to keep this, appearance of holiness. It's very important to them that they do that. That appearance of being holiness, of being holy. Now, people hear a story that, if you always seem to be somebody that's holier, you hear a story like this, you don't want to believe it, right? Especially if you're part of the organization. It seems unbelievable if you don't have the evidence. Now, the evidence were the witnesses, but the stories were being covered up by murders, by threats to children. And you got people in power that made this go away. This is the problem here. When religion takes a hold of all this power and can wield all this, corruption, threats, you don't know what kind of payoffs are made behind the scenes, because there's a lot of money to go around. I'm surprised it was only that little bit of money for $400,000 to 16 victims. And then the investigation comes up years later where now, yeah, we have more scientific advances, forensic evidence. We could do all types of DNA testing to find out there's a connection. But now that the case has gone on for so long, you can't, all that evidence is probably not available. It's not as fresh. The body of the nun, all of this. Now, I mean, I don't even know. Let's see, 1992. So this is now, if the first allegations really came out in 1992, that hasn't even been 30 years. And they're talking about this now. This is all really coming out now. In this, yeah, it was a 7-part series that Netflix did. That's when I mean, it came out, but some of these stories just don't go viral like that. They stay local because people's attention is on everything else, This is not a popular thing. I find it popular. I like to look into things like this because it deals with religious power, religious corruption. So let's go into what happened in Ireland, though. What's that? I thought that came up earlier. Yeah, the New York Times.
Can you get your lens in that hole there? That's a little monument that the locals put up in memory of the children.
Virgin Mary.
Just inside that wall there is where we came across the chamber with the remains in it. There used to be a little apple orchard in there. And that's where we were in, we were getting apples. So we jumped up the wall, and when we landed, we felt a hollow. There was a crack in the slab. So we actually pried it open. When we pulled across, like you could see, but the skeleton remains there, like bones. We were told then the next day that the priest had come up and said a prayer and not to go in there again, which we came in straight away. And the whole side had been levelled and cleared.
We always passed those 10-foot high walls. And I used to wonder why was there broken glass all along the top of the wall. I remember the children at school just vaguely, and I do remember they were segregated from the rest of us. We weren't allowed to play with them. These were like a different species at the time.
My mother got pregnant outside of marriage, and of course that was a big sin. And the priest in the parish got to hear about it and told her parents that it was an awful disgrace, that she couldn't be seen out because she'd be a bad influence. So they told her then that when the baby is due, that she was to be taken to Tuam, the home in Tuam, and the nuns will look after her there. Then he opened the door and told her she'll have to leave. And she said, I want my son. And they just closed the door on her face. And every week then she would walk from the centre of Tuam out the Dublin Road every week for 5.5 years, knocking on the door. I want to take my son out there. That's my son you have in there. I want to rear him. I want to look after him. And they said, no, he's got to be fostered out. And that was it.
I have no memories of it. I was there for 4.5 years.
There was a hedge each side of us and a crowd of us walking. That's the only memory I have.
I thought I was an animal at one stage. I used to get dreams at night that I was growing horns. And when I get up in the morning, the first thing I do, such a sigh of relief.
There was no love. There was no care. What happened in the home? You know, it can happen to you, that you can block things out at such a young age.
I suppose at the back of my mind, it was there in the subconscious, wondering about the children. I thought it was just a simple history, the history of the Bon Secours sisters and how they worked and how they operated. I thought I'd go to the local library and thought I'd get a volume of information in the home to work on. There was absolutely nothing. So I went to the local people. I said, that's the best way to find out information. And locals were a bit hesitant to say, oh, the poor little children in there, so, they were treated badly. An odd person to tell you, they remember screaming in the home. It was still very much a hush-hush affair. But I was gathering all this information in the back of my mind and getting a picture. And it was only then I got the story of, back in the 1970s, that the two boys found bones of children in a tank.
I've often thought about it afterwards, what did we come across? It was a chamber, a H-shaped chamber, and the amount of bones that were in it, there was a good few. What we came across in 1972 was reported, and the government knew about it, but yet they didn't do anything about it.
This whole story wouldn't get out of my head, so I had to follow it. I had to determine who was buried there. First of all, of course, I asked the Bon Secours sisters, and they said they had no knowledge or no records whatsoever of any burial in the home. And got on to the county council who owned the land then, and they had no records of burials either. So I wondered then, my thoughts went then to how many children actually died in the home. That's an inspector's report for the Tuam home from 1947. It shows the condition of the babies and toddlers, and it makes very harrowing reading. You have a 13-month-old baby in the care of Bon Secours sisters who are a nursing congregation. You have a miserable, emaciated child with voracious appetite and no control over body functions, probably mentally defective. Wizened limbs, 3 months old, wizened limbs. 3 weeks old, emaciated and delicate. And that was the Excel copy of the deaths of the babies and children. Unbelievable. Okay, all these deaths, where are they buried? They're not in the main Tuam graveyard. They're not in the mother's hometown graveyards. It is becoming quite obvious what had happened. At the time, there was a lot of questioning my findings, that it wasn't possible. And I was asking myself, is it the fact that there were illegitimate children? Is this stigma still around? That people just still don't care? Just made me more determined to fight this and to say, these children have to be there. People have to know about it.
Catherine contacted me and said that you're a sibling. I said, no, I never heard of. But part of it, and we have to find it here, she says, there's a name.
Marianne Bridget Mulryan was born to Peter's mother, Delia, in 1954. You can see it there. Same mother, same address.
She says, could be your sister.
Mulryan, 10 months.
1955, yeah?
1955.
That's it. They said she died from convulsions, but there's no doctors to certify that she died or where she was buried. I couldn't find out where she was buried. To this day, I don't even know. She could be sold off to America like a lot more was done.
It has been said that children were trafficked across to the United States. Of the 796 children, maybe some of those have been adopted illegally. And that is a very serious matter, if that is so.
We took their babies and we gifted them or we sold them, or we trafficked them, or we starved them, or we neglected them, or we denied them, to the point of their disappearance from our hearts and from our sight, from our country, and in the case of Tuam, and possibly other places, from life itself.
The state were complicit, of course they were. They were paying the sisters. Did the county council look into these burials? Did they not question what was happening to these children? Where were they? Did they care? Did they turn a blind eye?
And why did not one nun come forward and say, it was wrong what we did in June?
For a person that was supposed to be baptised, they're not supposed to put into unconsecrated ground. Yes, what did the church do? Put them in there and went and covered up those sites and put a playground on top of it. How would they feel about it if it was their sister or brother that was in there?
The government is the government, and the church is the church, and it's like knocking a brick wall, isn't it?
There's 7 years taken out of my life I don't know anything about. And it wasn't my fault that I came into this world. I didn't choose. I had no say in the matter. I just get the sense of the babies down there, that they are under me. And I feel if there's some way I could help them, just to get them out there and give them a proper burial. That's what I just love.
And you cannot right wrongs, but things need to be recognised for what they were like.
So there's a lot still that we don't know, but this is what we do know. These are some allegations, at least. I mean, with the murder of the sister, there was a lot of evidence, of course, not just allegations. But some of the stories that we read about were allegations. There's no way to prove some of these things when you hear a story about a rape. It's that happened 30 or 40 years ago. How can you really verify these things? And people will, choose what to believe in the situation, depending on where the information's coming from. In this case, it's a lot of information that's not coming from where it's supposed to be coming from, which is the Catholic Church. They're choosing to stay quiet. They don't want to speak about these things. They don't want to speak about the details. They'll address it, and that's it. How is the wrongs being made right? How can you make the wrongs right too? It's better to just be aware of these things to try to prevent it from happening in the first place. So there are positions of power that I feel are necessary in a society. Now, if you want to live in a peaceful society, you want to have the police department. That's necessary. Catholic Church in this instance, people think it's necessary because of their religious belief, which is based on bad reasons, in my opinion. And we can go into, I've gone into many different things about my belief, but regardless of my belief, about my religious belief at least, I think we can all agree that there needs to be some type of position of power. Some people like to lean towards their religious belief as this is my authority. I need to deal with any issues, has to go through them, through this cult, whatever church or whatever religion you belong to. I believe religions are all, cults, all these different religions. I believe they're all cults. Some are bigger than others. There's no evidence to prove a lot of the supposed supernatural things that Jesus Christ did. But they choose to believe that based off of what? That's not a common thing. But it's this is where their faith comes in, right? And they can always use that as an excuse. But when it comes to real situations like the murders, these cover-ups, these abuses, these straight murders that were done in the name of religion, now you don't need to know the details, and they don't care. People don't rely on faith when it comes to that. We need to have the truth. We need to know what's going on. We need to have the details. Can't just have faith that, oh, it's whatever. Like, you just forget about all logic and your own common sense that you use in everyday life, just because you have a religion attached to this belief, and you can use faith. But this has nothing to do with any of that. This here has to do with murder and a cover-up. So what's important is not your faith. What's important is that the details, the truth comes out. And if you're a promoter of speaking the truth, then why all these cover-ups? These are for people that are still in the Catholic Church. They don't like talking about these things. There's a lot of Catholics out there. Even in the, they're I guess it's under the Christian umbrella, so they're considered Christian apologists, Catholic apologists. You don't want to speak about these things. You want to talk about they love to go into the Bible because that's where they spend most of their time at, going into those things. But it's like, you have situations like this. How do you answer for this if you believe God is dealing with your faith? That's your claim. So, why is this happening within your belief in your group that you choose to claim, affiliation with? Religious affiliation here. Because of your belief now. You see how things get covered up? Because it's going to hurt the rest of the group. Yeah, because you have people in positions of power that need to be held accountable, more accountable. But is religious power necessary? It's not. You don't need that as an authority. A priest, that's trained in what? Right now, if you're trained in psychology and good things, you can really help somebody out, and you use that for good. But here you have somebody using their knowledge for evil. And using their religious faith as a cover-up is, like, you're somebody that's doing good. That's usually the worst person. They're not honest about who they are. Here we have a murder that was covered up, skull fracture. We don't know if the father did the actual murder, but he definitely knew about it. Probably paid somebody off. Those details are not known. And how many more things are not known. But, I wanted to do this video to talk about the different things that happen within these religious organizations. I'm going to call it a night here. Thank you for tuning in to San Miguel TV. We'll be back and do something in the future, maybe next week Sunday. Stay tuned. Everybody have a good night.